Hello everybody. Today we're looking at health and healing systems targeted particularly towards the player character. So this is an extension of the shooting tutorial that you may have seen already in the playlist, but you don't need to have done that one in order to do this one. I'm using the shooting template provided on Moodle, provided on the X Drive, but you can just use the standard template. It doesn't matter for the purposes of this tutorial. Adding a health script, adding a way to take damage, including when you enter into something or over a period of time. Perhaps you're being poisoned or attacked or something like that. Adding a socket interactor near the player's face so they could pick some water or a potion up and that could heal the player. Adding regenerative health and adding some UI elements to show damage. This is a natural extension to the shooting video because in the shooting system we made a magazine that's socketed into a gun and reloaded the gun. This is basically the same thing, but rather than adding ammo to the gun, we're going to be adding health to the player. But basically it's the same thing. So let's start with adding a health script to the player. I've got the scene set up. This is just the standard scene. I've got the gun from the previous tutorial with a magazine that reloads and works, but I've also added a spike pit. Doesn't look like much, but it's there to show you the idea. All this is a cube which I have made a trigger and I've turned off the mesh renderer for. So notice that I've turned the mesh renderer off here on this cube and you can see its outline, you can still see its collider, but you can't see the visuals. And all I've done to this spike pit object, this one here, is I've made a bunch of cylinders that kind of look a bit spiky. You could make something that looks far better than that, but you get the idea. It's a spike pit. What we're going to have is the player, as they walk into that area, will take damage, and we're going to look at different ways of implementing that feature. So first thing we're going to look at ultimately is adding a health script. Remember, the player, when we're dealing with VR, the player object lives in the XR interaction setup object, and in there the XR origin is your player character. So all of the information we want to do to put to our player is going to live in here. Let's add a component and let's call it player health. Quick word to the wise, remember that you have to start with an uppercase character and notice there isn't a space in there. It's all one word. So capital P, capital H, because we work in camel case. Player health, it's just going to keep a record of your health, basically. You've seen me do this a bunch of times by now. Primarily for the enemy, but there's no reason why the same kind of script can't work. We will also look at adding different modifiers to the player health as well, but we'll save that towards the end as a bit of a bonus feature. I'm going to delete the start function, but I am going to keep the update function. We may need that one later. What's going to happen in the player health is, well, we have a public. My God, it's good, isn't it, Visual Studio, the way it recommends stuff. I don't know if it's calculating based on what I'm saying, but yeah, that'll do. Public float health. I usually use HP just to denote the difference, but health will do the trick. I am going to give this an initial value of 100 because if you're dealing with health bars later on, 100 makes a nice percentage. So we're going to start with 100 health and should we do regenerative health while we're here? Yes, why not? So building on top of... Do you know what? I'm going to put the start function back in. There you go. Don't delete the start function. Rewind and undo the start function. But all I'm going to do here is just like we did in our ammo script. Have a public float for maximum health, which is at 100. And then the health value is set to nothing. Because in the start function, the amount of health that the player has will be equal to the maximum amount of player that the player can possibly have. Reason why this is useful is once you write your maximum amount of health in, it always gets set to that value. If you didn't want that, if you wanted it so the player's health could start at a number that isn't maximum, maybe your player wants to start injured in your game, you just wouldn't have that line of code. while we're here, let's talk about the most valuable debugging tool. If ever you don't want a line of code, or you're testing something but you don't want to delete it, comment it out with 2 forward slashes. If it's green, it won't execute. So that's always really helpful for testing. So we've got a script here that has a maximum amount of health, which is 100, and our current level of health, which is whatever our maximum health is. Going into game, looking at what that's written, I've now got max health, which is 100, and health. Even if I start that at 10, for example, my code will start and set our health value to be equal to our max health value. So that is what that start function is doing, is setting it to the maximum value. If you don't like it, get rid of it. But we've now got 2 values, so we've got an upper limit for how much health our player can have. We know what our lower limit is, because if they've reached 0, they're dead. So let's go and add in a way of taking damage. Depends entirely on how you want to implement this, but what we're going to say in this game, when we walk over to the spike pit, we will take a amount of damage. So there's a bunch of different ways you could do this. You could have a bunch of tags for things that are dangerous. So you could have a spike pit that is dangerous. You could have a damage script attached to each thing that could conceivably do damage. And whenever you collide with something, you check what that value is. Going to keep it really simple for today and just go with the first option. So I'm going to add a new tag, and this is going to be called damage. Is there a better word for that maybe? Damaging. This can do damage. And then in our code, I'm going to go underneath the update function and we're going to add our on trigger enter, which is one of the most useful things you can possibly use. Remember, we don't work with 2D, so we just want on trigger enter. That will write it all out for you. Remember, if this isn't auto-completing, you've probably not got it in your source and repos folder. So on trigger enter, what we want to say is, well, take our amount of health and minus it a bit. So minus equals, let's say this does 50 points of damage, semicolon, to say that you're done. Of course, the astute amongst you will have noticed this is incomplete, because currently this will do damage no matter the trigger you walk into. Could be anything that is a trigger. As a quick reminder, the word trigger means you walk into a zone that has a collider on it that has this is trigger thing clicked to true. Remember, a trigger you can walk into, but it will detect that you've walked into it and you can do whatever you like. Whereas if you don't have that, you won't be able to walk into it. It's a full area that you've physically stops you moving. So what we're going to do is modify our code here to say if the other thing involved in this interaction, why did it put 2 in? There you go. If other dot tag is equal to damaging, we're going to subtract our health. I'm just going to move that up into there and then save it. As always, we test, we never trust. I'll test this both in headset and I will test it in the simulator. I'll be curious if I get different results. Just like before, you can keep an eye on this value. I can't because I've got a headset on my head. So we're going to walk over to the area now. And let's see what we got. Nothing. Reason is we didn't tag our spike pit as damaging. We created the tag, but we didn't assign the tag. Walking over, walking over, walking over. You'll notice that I kind of jump up on the spikes. And that's because the cylinders have got their own colliders, but the zone does not. You can see I've now got 50 points of damage because I entered in the zone. If I walk out and then walk back in, I should now have 0 health. Really twitchy in the headset. So that ultimately works, but I don't think it's hugely elegant as a solution because you can walk into the spike pit, and as long as you don't leave it, you don't take any additional damage. So that is okay, but isn't great. I am just going to test this in the device simulator to see how it's being implemented if you have not got a headset, because it may not work. There you go. So if you are not got a headset on, you'll find that this actually won't work as expected. And I kind of half expected that because the simulator doesn't move the character. So you'll notice here we've moved the character and the character camera is now over there. The game is still running, but the collider hasn't gone anywhere. That's the thing triggering the collisions. So if you wanted to test this without a headset, put the scene view on while the game is running and just move the character over, and you could see there that that took 50 points away. Moving back 0, moving back -50. Really important to note that the device simulator is imperfect, so remember that during your testing. I'm going to turn it back off. So let's go and spice this up a little bit now with the next step. We're going to change it so it doesn't do damage over time. When we enter it, we're going to change it when it does damage over time. Really, really easy. Instead of on trigger enter, I want to change this to on trigger stay. That means for every frame you are in this area, you will take 50 points of damage. Some of you may have already spotted what's going to happen, but let's go and have a look, shall we? And again, I'm going to test this without a headset on so I can keep an eye on the values. So notice that my health is currently 0, and I'm going to move this into the zone, and that's kind of what I expected. Every frame we are losing 50 health. How do I know what my frame rate is? I click on game, I click on stats, and I can see I'm currently getting 400 frames per second. But if I put the headset on, that should crash to 72, which is the behavior we get because it syncs up with the refresh rate of the headset. Okay. Still don't know why it's 72 because the refresh rate is not 72 on that, but whatever. So there's a couple of things here that are obviously not good. 50 is a crazy number to be doing every frame, but also the frame rate can change. If you're on a really well performing PC, you may get a higher refresh rate, and a higher refresh rate headset, you will get different values. So let's just change this. Instead of doing 50 points of damage, let's instead do 5. But that won't solve our problem until we times it by time dot delta time. If you remember from the very early tutorials, that's something that you use to say, do something, but scale it by your frame rate. So if you are getting 60 frames per second, it will do it once. It will times it by 1. If you get in 30 frames per second, it will times it by a half, so the value is the same. If you get in 120 frames per second, it will times it by 2. Basically, what it's basically going to do is make the value that is being resolved consistent irrespective of your frame rate. Let's just check that that's now giving much more reasonable values. We've got 100 HP. We walk into our trigger zone and you can see it falling. Because we made it a float, you can see that you've got the decimal values over there. The player leaves the danger zone and it stays at the value. So you could imagine an area of poisonous radiation, you could imagine spikes or enemies, or you could imagine you've been poisoned in some way. It works. I do, however, want to just highlight that there may be many different ways you want to take damage in your game. Maybe if the enemy shoots you, or maybe if you walk into a spike pit or something like that. So this bit of code where you take damage, we're going to move into its own function. So I'm going to move down here and I'm going to create a public void, not that at all, public void take damage. Not on connected to server. You remember that in our examples when we've done enemy health, we've used a function called take damage. You can have functions in different scripts with the same name. Your enemy health can have a thing called take damage. Your player health can have a thing called take damage. As long as you don't have two functions in the same script with the same name, because that won't like it. You see, it's complaining there's already a definition with that name. So when we take damage, we are going to do something. Maybe that is that we take 5 points of damage always. Maybe we don't, but you know, maybe we take 5 points of damage, so our health goes down by 5. And we do some other value. So let's just say we do 5 points of damage every time we take damage. This then needs changing. We're not always going to do that. We want to tell it to take damage. So we're going to tell it to, every time we walk into our zone, take some damage. So if we weren't doing that line of code now, we'd have the same problem we had before. Go, take 5 points of damage. So what we're now going to pass in is make the amount of damage equal to whatever the function is calling it, whatever the call is. So we're going to tell the take damage function to expect a floating point value getting passed in, which is called damage. And instead of doing 5 points of damage, we do how much damage is getting passed in. Now we're calling take damage and it's expecting an amount of damage. Now we can pass in what we wrote before. I want 5 points of damage times by the time.delta time. As far as you're concerned, that should still just work exactly as it was, but now you can have other enemy guns saying, oi, take damage, player, and this is how much damage I want you to take. Or if a timer runs out, you want to take some damage when a timer reaches 0. Say, oi, player, go take some damage, and you can pass in the amount of damage. Gives you a lot more control. So let's just check that we haven't broken anything while doing that. Good, because you always test, you never trust. So there we are, taking damage over time and writing a better way of doing that. Right, let's heal our player. What we're going to have in our game is that we're going to have some item that we pick up and place near the player's face to heal. Let's just go with a standard, I don't know, cylinder. Maybe it's a bottle of water. I know some people are making boxing games. Maybe you wanted a bottle of water that you drink, or maybe it's a medicine, or maybe it's a whatever. Imagine it looks far better than that. What we're now going to do with our XR origin, in there you'll find there's information to do with the camera and movement, information to do with the camera. You can see where the main camera is. And it's important to remember, if I just go into play mode, the main camera's position will be equal to where the headset is. So at the minute, I haven't got the headset on, so it's snapped it to the floor, and you can see that's where it is. If I do tell the headset that it's on my head, currently just covering it with my hand, the camera position will move up and down, dependent where the headset is. So you can see that preview and you can see that's what that's doing. So if I move it down, if I move it up, left and right. So what we want to do is make a socket interactor a child of the camera. So it'll move with the camera, it'll move with the head. So just like we did for our magazine, we're going to create an XR socket interactor. I right clicked on main camera to get up to this. Socket interactor, and I'm going to move it forward. Remember the blue axis is forward. And now we want a new interaction layer mask that can only accept health items. Otherwise we could eat magazines or grenades and heal, which probably don't want to do. So the interaction layer mask will be nothing, but we are going to make a new layer, and instead of magazines, we want one for health items. And again, if I click back on the socket interactor and choose from the layer mask nothing apart from health items, and I'm going to tell this item to be grabbable, XR grab interactable, and I want it to have, I do want it on default. So I still want to keep the default layer, but I also want it to tell it that it is a health item. So there's now mixed, default, and health. This could be interesting. So I'm going to test this. Can I go and put this next to my face? There we go. So you could obviously position where you wanted the health item to be or whatever, but currently it just feels like it's glued to my head. So let's move that socket interactor a little bit back, a little bit down. There's a healing item that you could potentially eat or take or something like that. The magazine that we did in the previous tutorial which was all in the shoot script, when we reloaded, the amount of ammo went up to the maximum amount of ammo. We destroyed the thing that was getting passed in, and we updated some text that said how much ammo we'd got on the gun. We can recycle all of that code basically. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to have a new function in our player health script that will be public, it will be void, and it will be called heal. Just like we did in our shoot script, we need to pass in the select enter event args, which is a piece of data. So that needs to get passed in. If you didn't follow the other tutorial, this is where that's coming from. If I look on the socket interactor, and we're going to do something that says on selected, select enter event args. That's the dynamic piece of data that gets passed in about the event that occurs when a socket gets used. So what we're going to do here is I want to destroy. I'm going to look at the data about the interaction. I want to find the interactable object, and I want to get the game object, which I need to get its transform first, to get the game object from, semicolon, to say that you're done. So progress, we're deleting the food, the healing item, the whatever. And then we also need to set our health to go up a little bit. Worth remembering though, when your health goes up, there is a maximum amount of health you want. So if I just say health plus equals 10 every time I pick up this item. Again, I'm going to demonstrate this without the headset on to show you that you can. I'm just going to make a bunch of health items. And again, demonstrating this without the headset on. If I were to just pick this item up, drop it on the floor next to the player. Oh, it's gone. Put it next to the player's feet and move it up. This is, again, while it's running, so the physics is going to be fighting me. Move it up, move it up, move it up. You can see that it is socketed. So that's how you can test it without a headset. The reason why one of these fell through the floor, by the way, is they moved so quickly the collision detection couldn't detect it. To fix that, if you have any objects that do fall through the floor, change the rigid body properties, change its collision detection from discrete to continuous and speculative. Okay. What we also now need to tell our socket interactor is that on select, I want to call that health script and tell it to use the ability to heal. So clicking the plus icon, dragging in the XR origin into the slot because that holds our health script. In there, choosing our player health script, and on there the only dynamic thing that we've got at the top is heal, tells the player to heal. So let's test it one more time. The XR origin currently has 100 health. Let's fix that by sticking him in the spike pit for a second. There we go, that's enough damage. Again, notice I've not got the headset on. could do, but don't have to. I'm going to grab this that now shouldn't fall through the floor, stick it by their feet, and I'm going to just move that up by their face, and you should now see that the health has gone up. And I'm going to do that a couple more times. The health should have gone up. Perfect. And I'm going to show you the obvious problem, which is that health can currently go above our maximum value. So our health is currently at 105 out of 100, and that doesn't make sense. So in the game at the minute, we just get 10 health when we pick up a health item, no matter how much our maximum is. So let's fix that. If our amount of health, if we were to add 10 to it, or whatever our recoverable amount of health is, if we were to add 10 to it, if that is less than or equal to our maximum amount of health, cool, that's fine. Add 10, absolutely fine. Go and add 10, so go do that. If it is not, well, do you know what? Take the amount of health and add a little bit instead. Now, I've done this a million times, but my brain just can't figure it out for the moment. So, easy fix. Sorry, my brain couldn't figure this out for a second. Health equals maximum health. So let's just step through the logic here. If we don't have enough health, if 10 means we don't max out our health, we add the full 10. If that is not the case, we've obviously gone above the threshold, so just set it to our maximum health. That should prevent that issue. Let's test it because we never trust it. $75 health. Nom. 85 health. $95 health. If I've written this properly, should go up to 100 rather than 105. Oh, don't roll away. Don't roll. No. No. Up. Well, this is less fun than I anticipated. You're not rolling away, let's use you. No. 100 health, which is our maximum value. So we've now got a bit of code here that maximizes the amount of damage we can take. You'll also notice at the minute our take damage script doesn't have the opposite, which is if we get to 0, we should probably die. So let's write that real quick. In your game, if you take damage and that brings you to 0, so take an amount of damage. If the amount of health the player has after you've taken damage is less than or equal to 0, the player's dead. So what should we do? Well, it depends. If that's the end of game, if that's what you want, let's make a scene. Create a scene called lose. And here's your lose screen. I have got another tutorial about making pretty UI and main menus and stuff, but for today, here's your lose screen, which we need to add to our build settings. So in our build settings, we'd add our scene and our lose screen. Again, I've got a more complex tutorial on that for those who want to follow it. And what we're now going to say is when our health is less than or equal to 0, call the scene manager. Scene manager, that should add scene management at the top. Scene manager.load the scene. And which scene do we want to load? Well, the one called lose. Long as I called it lose with a capital L, which I did, has to match precisely and has to be in your build settings, otherwise this won't work. Now let's go and let our player take some damage, shall we? Oh, it's going to take forever. Let's just set it to 20. There you go, we are in our loose screen. Wonderful. Or you could restart the game by going back to the same scene, you know, Wildy Royster. So we've now got that as a healing item. Regenerative health is, well, it's the way that we are taking damage over time in reverse. So let's go do that. So we're now going to have a new function. I could put this at the bottom. Yeah, let's just add it to the bottom. So just above the squiggly bracket at the bottom, public void, and I now want a new function. No. Yes, I'm being inelegant here, but whatever. Heal over time. And the job of heal over time is to do all of this again. So I've just literally copy pasted that, but instead of adding 10, add whatever value that you like. Maybe we're going to add an amount of health. Float heal amount. And instead of healing 10 every time, we're going to do heal amount, heal amount. So that won't do anything, but I'll leave that on screen so you can see what we're doing. So when we heal over time, we add the amount of healing. And if that would be too much, we cap it out. In order for this to work, we're now going to use our update loop. If you've deleted your update loop, you can just add it back in by typing update, pressing enter. And all we're going to do every frame is call our heal over time function. Heal over time, which looks exactly the same as when we took damage. We want to heal how much? Maybe we heal slowly 1.5. If ever you put a decimal value in, you have to finish it with an F, a float. Remember, because we're timesing that 1.5 per frame, we need to times it by time.delta time. Otherwise you get inconsistencies based on your frame rate. So every frame, heal 1.5 units per second. That's what time.delta time is. It's scaling it by second. Goes down here and maxes that amount out. As always, test it, don't trust it. Should cap out at 100. If I give him 85 health, it is slowly increasing over time based on our regeneration value, and should stop at 100. Which is exactly where we get. Even if you went into minus figures. You should never end up in minus figures, because in this game you can't take damage that takes you below 0. Otherwise it's game over. So we've got some stuff in there. Regenerate health. How easy was that? Let's see how much health we've got. It depends how you want to do health. If you wanted a health system that just gave you a number on screen, that's fine. If you wanted a health bar, we're not going to go into that today, but you have to make your own from scratch. Basically, a health bar is just some rectangles. I may do another tutorial on this at some point in the future, depends. But let's just say for now, we would like our health as a number on one of our hands. I'm going to first modify our health script to have a new thing at the top, a public text mesh pro u GUI. Wonderful title. And I'm going to call that health text. And every frame, every update, we're going to set the health text to equal our amount of health. And health is a number which we need to convert to a string of text by calling the toString function. That's how easy that is to get it to display. So we had a slot for our health text, and then we said I want that text to equal our health and display it. Now we need to think about where we want to put it, and I'm going to put it on the left hand. So in the camera offset, in the left controller, there you go, if I just choose the left controller, this will take a bit of finesse. You'll notice the hands aren't visible because in the other tutorial I showed you how to add hands. The controllers won't be visible either because they get spawned in when the game starts. But I can see the poke interactors. That's what those are. So let's just say on the left hand, I now want to make a child, which is an XR UI canvas. And I want that to be scaled down because it will be huge. You see? Big. Scale it down, scale it down, scale it down. If ever it goes into minus figures, if the scale goes into minus figures, just be aware that that can happen when you scale it down so much it goes below 0, and then it will go the other way around. So you see that's minus. You don't want minus figures because your hands will be upside down. So I'm going to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. And I'm going to make the canvas, I'm going to right click on it and make some UI and a piece of Text Mesh Pro. You may have to import, maybe a little pop-up if this is the first time you've done it, just press import. I'm going to scale that down, click on center align, click on whatever, and I'm going to have it just say 0 for now. There you go, the text value lives in there. So if I play the game, you'll notice my headset disconnected. There's a little pop-up there a second ago, let's reconnect it. Oh, I've broken that, haven't I? Anyway, so what I expect to happen is when I move my hand around, I should see this value. This value should just say 0 though. And I've put it on my left controller, so do I see it on the left hand? There's my right hand, there's my left hand, and you can see the number 0. So I could line that, I could move it around. Keep in mind though, I don't want it to say 0, I want it to say the amount of health. So the way I'll get it to say the amount of health is back up to my Excel origin, which controls my health script, and I've got a slot here for which text should display my health. Well, this one should. Drag, drop, every frame, that will now say how much health we've got as a number. Oh, my headset didn't like that for long. So there you go. You can see I've got 100. My ammo for my gun says 0 on it because there's 0 ammo. I'm going to pick the gun up. I'm going to load the magazine. I've now got 12. You get the idea. One thing I'm going to do just to test that one last time, if I walk into the spike pit, does that number go down? You can obviously move that wherever you like. You can see the values going down. That looks ugly. You know, you don't want a twitchy decimal value like that. It doesn't look very good at all. I like the ray interactor actually lets me point at it. So that's no good, is it? If you don't want it to display that really accurate decimal value, let's change it. I'm just going to move that over here a bit. So what I'm going to do in my code is I don't want to display the number precisely. I don't want it to display the precise value. I just want it to round to the nearest whole number. So to do that, I'm going to say math functions dot round, and I'm going to ask it to round. Ooh, why'd you do that? Round the health variable, which I then convert to a string. So let me write that out in full. Take the math functions, mathf, use the rounding function, round the health variable, and because that is a number, needs to be converted to text, convert it to a string, semicolon to say that you're done. This should now at least give a cleaner value. From here, you could have it change colour based on how healthy you are. You could have it have a strawberry jam effect in front of the camera on a canvas, change colour. Oh, let's do that. If you're still here, it's worth knowing, isn't it? So it's now giving you at least a whole number, which is nice. Under the hood, it's a decimal value, but every frame it's rounding it to the nearest whole number, which feels pretty good. So that's it for the tutorial, but if you're still part of the cool kids who are hanging around, let's do a little bit more, shall we? Let's add some colour. Let's just make sure I am recording. Good. Let's make that change colour based on your health value. So currently it has got this vertex colour of white, and we can change the colour based on whatever we liked. We're going to have it just have a couple of states of colour, or maybe I want to trial it. I don't know. I'm going to make this up as I go along. I haven't planned this. So every time we update our health, so in the update loop, what I'm also going to do is take the health text. It's got to be listening to me. It has got. There is no way it could have predicted that without listening to me. So health text dot color. Notice that color is spelled American, C-O-L-O-R, and I can set it to a value that I like. But I want it to be a gradient of color. I want it to go from green, red to green via yellow. I'll have a think about the best way to do that. For now, I'm going to be really ugly about it. I'm going to write a dirty great if statement. If our amount of health is greater than 25, set the colour to equal colour.red. Else if, notice this is an else if, there is a big difference here. Else if the health is greater than 50, set the colour to yellow. Else if, good guessing but not right, if it's greater than 75, set the colour to green. I've just tidied that up. The keyboard shortcuts, if you don't know, for tidying up is Control K followed by Control D as one smooth motion. For some reason, if it's really ugly, Control K does nothing, Control D tidies it up. Don't know why you've got to press one, then the other, but you do. So now what I expect to see is 3 colour states, depending on how much health you've got. I don't like the fact it's straight to red. That's probably not right, is it? That's not right at all. I'm going to decrease the damage rate in a second for testing. Well, I've got these statements wrong. Let's find out what I've done. First things first, we are going to take damage over time. It's now going to be 10, just for speed. If it's greater than 25, set it to... Oh, okay, I've done it the wrong way round, haven't I? Right. I need to do high numbers first. If it's greater than 75, set it to green. If it is not greater than 75, if it is greater than 50, set it to yellow. So 50 to 75 should become yellow. If it is greater than 25, set it to red. I got it the wrong way around in my statement. Let's just quickly check my logic. 75 or above, set it to green. If it is not 75 or above, check if it's above 50. If it is, set it to yellow. If it's not above 50 or 75, check if it's above 25. If it is, set it to red. Or else, you know, I could set it to black or whatever you wanted. This is why we test. Iterative development. It's your friend. So it should be green. It's green. It's a khaki shade of green, but it's green. It's yellow. It's red. Okay. And we died. all I'm going to do very quickly is just modify that because my numbers were wrong. If it's greater than 75, I want it to be green. If it's greater than 50, I wanted it to be yellow. If it's greater than 25. What I'm going to do is just change this. 0 to 25 should be red. 25 to 50 should be yellow. 50 and above, I'm going to set to green. Should work. Always test it. All of them I'm going to show you here as well is if you didn't want the default colours of bright green, bright yellow, bright red, you can add your own custom colours. Colour dot to make a new colour, it's actually surprisingly complicated. If you want to give a value, you would like a new colour. And then to create a new colour, you pass in the 3 values you want it to be in red, green and blue. So the easiest way to test this is to pick a colour using any of the colour swatches. So you know, if I just chose a vertex colour here, it will give you the value of red, green and blue. Let's say I wanted that particular shade of yellow. Well, I get that value, and that value, which I'm sure I can copy. I'm sure there's a copy value somewhere. Nope. Just have to remember them or write them down. Or snap it to one side, I suppose. Ugh, didn't want that. So the new colour I would want has 241 red 156, separating it with a comma, 156. So that's how you generate a custom colour if you wanted to, or a unique colour rather than custom. So that should now be a weird shade of peach. You get the idea. My headset's disconnected and I can't be bothered to reconnect it. Where's my hands gone? Around there somewhere. Oh no, controller switched off. There we go. So you can see it's defaulted to white. Not entirely sure why. I think that's because I've not got the headset connected. Oh well. Have a play with it, you can get some interesting values from it. So we've looked at some interesting things you can do with health. You could have in your game even more complexity. You could have it so you regenerate over health if you grab a healing item but you don't by default. You could have it so, depending on the armour that you've got equipped, you take different amounts of damage, which is scaled based on your armour value. Oh, let's just do that real quick while we're here. I'm on a roll. Public float armor value. Let's just give you an armor value of nothing to start. An armor value of 1. That'll be important. Whenever you take damage, you don't just subtract damage, you take damage and you divide it by your armor value. This is why I set it to 1 by default, because if I had an armor value of 0, find out what happens when you divide something by 0 and have some fun with that new discovery of mathematics. So I've set it to 1. You could imagine that when you equip something, that number goes up to 2 or 3 or 4 or any number, and what that will do is, well, make it less damaging over time. So you could see how easy that might be. You could have a little function for equipping your armor. Let's just do that real quick while we're here. Why not? Public void equip armor. When you equip armor, your armor value goes up by 1. But how could you equip armor? Socket interactors. They're great. I won't go through this fully, but you could obviously say to your left controller, maybe there is a socket that some armor sockets onto, and that follows you around, increases your armor value. You could imagine you've got a helmet that you wear that would go above your head that you equip. So I'd imagined a system where you've got left arm, head, right arm could have armor on it, and those values could go up or down depending on the armor value that you've got. Just testing something. I don't think this will work, but why not? And if you've got this far, stay along for the ride. Socket interactor. There you go. Imagine this is your armor socket. When you select something onto it, you'd have to check that it's got a layer mask of armor. Only armor should give you armor value. Tell the player to tell the health to equip armor. There you go. That's what I wanted to test, is because I've put a float value in there, the amount of armor that you add, well, could now be any number. So that could be 1, that could be 2, or it could be a number equal to what it is. Maybe the helmet gives you more armor value than the arms or the body or whatever it is that you might want. Or maybe each piece of armor gives you a unique amount of armor value. Again, I haven't tested this. Let's just do that quickly. Let's say we have an armor value of 1, and we'll go and walk into the spike pit. Keeping an eye on the health. That's dropping rapidly, but now we've got an armor value of 5, dropping 5 times slower. Armor value of 10. Armor value of 1. And let's just, for the lols, armor value of 0. Game crashes. That's exactly what I expected. Right, that's everything from me, I promise. Thank you very much, guys. Enjoy your day.